Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of The Sweet Spot. This is your host, Ryan Embry. If you are watching us here on YouTube, we have a few announcements to make. First, we've hit an incredible milestone. This is Sweet Spot 150 episodes. Thank you all. I just want to take a moment before we get started on this great episode that we have today to thank everyone for taking the time to listen to us, for all of your support. 150 episodes is something absolutely insane, saying out loud. So again, thank you. We have a very familiar guest who I feel like you've been on quite a number of these episodes, Jason, our Chief Technology Officer at Travel Media Group, Jason Lee. Thank you again for joining me on the Sweet Spot.
Thank you, Ryan. Thanks for I'm really excited to talk to you about this today.
Yeah, we're super excited. And if you're watching us, like I said, on YouTube, if you're not, first of all, encourage you, go to our YouTube channel. You're going to find some exclusive content there that you'll only find on YouTube. But if you are watching us on YouTube, you'll see we might have a little bit different feel and vibe. We have moved into a brand new Sweet Spot studio. We are so excited to showcase this new space. It was custom built. You are going to see all types of new looks from this space, new exciting content. So be sure to follow and subscribe to Sweet Spot. We've got so much jam-packed for you. But speaking of innovation and new, that is exactly what we're here to talk about, Jason. We have had a number of episodes talking about the incredible developments that you and your dev team here at Travel Media Group and some of the innovation that you've put out there. This might be one of the most innovative, the Guest Experience Snapshot powered by TMG Oneview AI. Before we get talking about it, what we've come to learn is with these innovations, there's always kind of a story or a why behind it. Walk us through that with this Guest Experience Snapshot.
Well, for a long time, we obviously accumulate reputation data. So we get data from all the sites, we get it for all the hotels. And so we have been, as anybody who's seen any of our stuff knows, we have lots of numbers, lots of ways of kind of creating different types of metrics and showing those metrics in various forms. And I think that's really sort of industry standard where we get a metric, or a KPI, we sit on that, we manage to that. And then in some ways you sort of lose like what that KPI is for.
Sure.
So you're sort of like almost, the purpose for your improvement of a KPI is the KPI.
Yeah.
Instead of for what the KPI was originally for. And I think with reputation, we sort of get into that where you have so much data that you sort of lose track of what is most important. And so what we wanted to do is even going deeper than sentiment analysis. So sentiment analysis really was this natural language processing that we have been doing for quite a while, where we take sentence chunks and we look at word modifiers and things like that to create positive, neutral, and negative statements inside of a review, and then take those down further into the various aspects of a guest stay. With this, though, with generative AI, we have an opportunity to actually pull even further than that and it's not just the metric. So what you'll find is when you look at the Guest Experience Snapshot, there is no metric on it. It's literally the text of the guest. It's the experience a guest had and the text that multiple guests had. So the text that, of that experience. So for example, if a bunch of guests really loved the experience at the front desk with the staff of the front desk, you would see most guests mention an amazing front desk experience, and then there might be a front desk clerk's name called out inside of that sentence. So, and then you'll see maybe 17 mentions.
Yeah.
And so what that's doing then is it's saying like, so here's sort of like, it's accumulating all of this text and saying, here's this thing that went right. And then the same thing for something that went wrong. And in the industry, we really don't have anything like that. I think TripAdvisor sort of went out there and created sort of a summary of guest sentiment that they put out. They're like, oh, this is AI generated, and it's a summary of guest sentiment. But inside of like the ops side, or where I'm maybe even evaluating what's going on at this hotel from a management standpoint, I all I have is metrics. I don't have, or unless I read one review at a time.
Well, to put it in perspective, Jason, I used to, with the educational webinars that we put on with Reputation and social media, one of my kind of best practices was to physically print out some of your reviews and start highlighting those keywords that you're seeing over and over again. So this is obviously the more technological next step to that, but also can give you some insights on how to improve on maybe the things that you're falling short of.
No, absolutely. And I think again, what makes this so powerful is that you're coming out of maybe the emotion of a number, and the emotion around the number to a KPI, that you're now getting into actual guest sentiment. The other issue with single review analysis, let's say, is that it's easy, very easy and common for you to take a single issue that a guest had and discard that as a one-off. To say that this was circumstantially, this series of events happened, that this guest had a bad stay or they had a bad experience here. But this only happened to this guest, not to anybody else. And so what we sort of see it in aggregate. So we sort of, as we're responding to reviews or even looking at review data as a whole, we can sort of see this bigger picture. But as you're sort of ingesting review by review, either through an alert system of your brand or through Oneview with TMG, you're still just getting these little snippets instead of all this together. So what the other big purpose of this is to create this thing called inter-rater reliability, which basically, so in order for there to be a sentence chunk in the guest experience snapshot, multiple guests have to have had the same experience.
Yeah.
And so that's another it's a key point of this. So this is also something, so that's why we start with positive and then go to negative, is that you have a bunch of guests that are having great experiences. Here they are.
Right.
And then here you have you have another bunch of guests that are having experiences that are really an opportunity operationally or an opportunity, from a service standpoint, but you can now see them and you cannot discount it as a one-off.
Yeah. And sometimes that's tough to do because, one of the things that now I challenge hoteliers with this guest experience snapshot is say, what do you think are issues at your property, right? And match them up against what people are actually saying in your reviews, or what do you think people love about your property, and see if there's alignment there, right? I think as hoteliers, we tend to think that we know our hotel better than anyone else, but our guests are really telling us at a moment's notice what are the positive and negative things that they are experiencing at that time. And as we know, not every single person is going to a review site to leave that feedback. So if your inter-rater reliability is, 6 or 7 mentions on an issue, that could really be 3 to 4, 5 times more than what you're seeing in guests are experiencing.
Correct. And I think you take really probably the key pieces of sentiment, right? So probably the most looked at piece of sentiment is cleanliness. So you look at cleanliness. Often we will see positive and negative cleanliness sentiment, and they will be the top numbers. They'll be the most people mentioned cleanliness and the most people mentioned dirtiness, right?
Right.
So it fits into that cleanliness, positive, negative. So you have the same thing actually in the guest experience snapshot, but what we find in the guest experience snapshot is different types of mentions of cleanliness.
Yeah.
I loved how the pool area was clean and beautiful. I loved, the lobby, right? And then there might be another mention there. Then there's multiple mentions of a bathroom issue.
Sure.
Right. So when you see that, you can, it's way more, you can diagnose that so much easier than saying, well, some of the guests like cleanliness and some of them don't.
Yeah.
It's a 50-50.
Right. And it's one of those things where if guests are reading reviews about your cleanliness in a negative light before they've even stepped on property, that has lowered the bar for what they think clean is for your property. They could come in and see if they've been reading all day reviews on multiple sites about, hey, this room is dirty, you're going to come in naturally with a different eye than if you would have come in and not known that information. So this is really good to kind of take from an operational standpoint. But the AI doesn't stop there, which is giving you that information. It actually gives you some ways to improve the guest experience too, which I think is really, really cool and unique.
Yeah. So we didn't want to just leave it at that.
Right.
And that's why we also have these bundled in months. That's why it's a month at a time. And so we added something called recommendations, and it's a really cool part of this. And it probably was the trickiest piece of training that we did by far. Because, you know, if you kind of leave generative AI to its own devices, it kind of, it says a bunch of crazy stuff.
Right.
So we had to really rein it in and take like real world scenarios and real world fixes. But what's kind of cool about this is that things that you sort of you look at that are maybe causing guest friction, but you as a hotelier look at it and you're like, you know what? How am I going to change that my hotel's near a busy road?
Mm-hmm.
How am I going to change road noise? I can't do that.
Right.
But it might be something that has that. So some of the recommendations that we have are really more, maybe not as much about how do you fix that? How do you fix the physical plant of your property?
Sure.
But it's more about how do you inform guests? How do you create a situation where guests know the situation they're walking into? You put them in the best possible position to set an expectation for their stay. And so some of that has to do with that. It's about training your front desk to handle these situations in a different way.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's educating the guests before they arrive. We've talked about that by doing that in things like review responses. Social media makes for a great way to do that. You know, one of the examples would be if someone says the lack of variety of food within your breakfast, right? Instead of maybe just talking about your breakfast on social media, show exactly what that breakfast looks like. And then all of a sudden, now I know what to expect when I come on property. I'm not expecting this breakfast buffet, this giant breakfast buffet. I know exactly what I'm getting. Might not necessarily turn it around and say this is a great variety, but it actually will lessen the blow and maybe improving your reputation on a few points. But it could be something where that recommendation also says maybe add variety, right?
Yeah.
And talk about that. And we've heard stories. I mean, we talk to hoteliers every single day and encourage them to make little tweaks and changes like that. And the guest experience snapshot, month over month, looking at that will give you a good indicator of the sentiment of what guests are feeling about those changes.
Absolutely. And I think it's that kind of like interesting thing. So it's not like we're telling you how to run your hotel.
No.
It's just giving you some ideas that these little irritants that are happening. So I'll give you an example. We had a hotel that we sort of were looking at from the beginning. And so we've had this now live for 3 months. And in the first month, we noticed that they were having issues with their shower doors. Like the doors specifically, there was a bunch of mentions in the first time we looked at it.
Yeah.
And so the next month came, and again, there were mentions of the doors, and it had a little bit of a different text, but it was the same mention.
Sure.
The third one had the same mention, and so the recommendations are sort of like varying a little bit, but still trying to be like, hey, you know, we'll look into this.
Yeah.
And I do think it's those kinds of things, is keeping it top of mind. You're not going to fix everything all the time. You know, there's things that are going to be stuff that maybe are part of your renovation or they're part of other things, but it's about awareness that they're causing guest friction, and copying to that. You know, one thing that's sort of hard in operations is you're balancing so many other things and just getting to that space where you're like saying, yeah, this is a problem.
Yeah.
And admitting that to yourself and saying, yeah, this is a problem.
Sure.
But then being proactive about it. You know, I guarantee any hotelier listening to this podcast right now has rooms at their hotel right now that they rent last.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
They end on purpose.
100%.
It's like the last rooms I rent.
Yep.
Because I know there's problems.
I know.
You know, or this wing.
Right.
You know, so I know there's going to be issues down this corridor. And I think, but that's what this is really about. It's about taking this data and making it very accessible, very usable.
And we spent a lot of time on this podcast episode talking about the negative things, right? And one of the things is it also provides all the great sentiment that guests are saying. And this could be a great game plan blueprint for you for a social media strategy. If you are seeing that people love attractions, restaurants, location, start sharing the businesses that are near your location to just even further amplify all the things that guests love about the property. So I know we've talked a lot about recommendations and fixing things, and obviously the low-hanging fruit that we can fix to improve the guest experience, we're always looking to do that. but it's also a great guidebook on using what people, what guests love to market the hotel, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a lot of really great points inside there. And I think social media is a great place to use it. Your website's another great place to use it. So, we have really friendly people at our front desk, and our guests talk to us about it all the time. Why not mention it?
And there's also some really cool use case and potentially using competitor data, right? We've talked about that on this podcast, on educational webinars. Sometimes when you're reading those reviews about guest cleanliness and you don't happen to have a cleanliness problem, highlighting things like a housekeeper for the month, talking about your cleanliness protocols subconsciously. When you see that and your competitors have struggling with their cleanliness scores, now all of a sudden you have the upper hand, competitive advantage. We're always looking for that, especially in a really crowded competitive market there. So,
but I think this type of data, to your point where you're just talking about, I think you can print this out and bring it to your front desk meeting.
Sure.
Talk about the positive things that are going on. Really praise people for the positive comments that are coming in, and then say, hey, and we also had some stuff we need to work on for this month. And let's do it. We'll revisit this next month. So it's kind of a cool way to, same thing with housekeeping or maintenance. But I think it's a very kind of portable, cool thing you can use inside of these meetings to help make things better.
Yeah, it's so cool. And be mindful also of the season at which you're looking at this, right? I always talk about summer being the ultimate stress test for a lot of these properties. You might be able to keep that room that you were talking about unoccupied throughout the winter just because your occupancy isn't there. But all of a sudden on summer, you're renting that thing every single night. And problems maybe that were like minor issues are now starting to bubble up into major problems during those summer months. We saw an influx, a huge influx. I mean, you guys were on pace for responding to reviews to what was the number?
Like over 40,000 a month.
Yeah, an incredible amount of number, which is fantastic because a lot of hoteliers saw those guests and that was made for a very busy travel season. But it also can really uncover some things looking year to year, month to month. All of those variables there are going to really create some cool patterns and trends, give you some extra insights into the property.
Yeah, we launched this in summer. So we did see a lot of, like, to your point, we saw a lot of AC climate control stuff.
Sure.
Because it could be going back to a stress test. It's your first stress test, with a full hotel and everybody using the AC.
Yeah. So let's talk about, AI, because I feel like, one of the things that we've been seeing, whether it be on social media or reading in publications and stuff like that, is the use case for AI within hospitality. Typically an industry that I would argue is a little bit slower to get to implement technology. But we respond to reviews, right? Super important. We've talked about the importance of responding to reviews, hit some milestones with, I think we're closer to 1.8 million guest reviews responded to. Maybe there's some hoteliers on here that are saying, well, why not use AI for responding to reviews? What would you say to those hoteliers?
So generative AI has come a very long way, and it feels like almost like weekly.
Yeah.
New models are coming out, new pieces to this puzzle are coming out. So not just text, but also image and other stuff that it's just unbelievable, just incredible. But we're still kind of in this weird space, I think, and especially when it comes to review response. So I think you get to this space where there's spots where you could use it, but not yet here. Mm-hmm. And the reason why we have not gone there, and we're actually really careful about this and very deliberate about this. We're using it in text summary and some of these other places to create better analytics. But when it comes to communicating with the guest, we're very deliberate in that space. And the reason why we are is because we see that as actual communication. We don't see that as some sort of throwaway, platitude from AI.
Yeah.
We see this as this is a human being who stayed with us, and we want to be as part of that conduit between the hotel and their guest. Our responsibility is to represent them in the best possible way, not just to the guests who wrote it, but to all the people that read it. And we think the primary pillars of review response have to do with communication. It's authentic communication to the guest who wrote this review. And if you do that correctly, you do that in a really sincere way, it resonates with the guest who's reading it. And guess what? You get some dividends with the OTAs for responding to all your reviews and other things on top of that. So you get these, you get three, really powerful, pieces of ROI out of review response. But I think if you don't have that first part, if that is insincere and that's funky, and AI uses very specific language, and if you're reading, you'll see vocabulary that is not normally used in the course of communication, that a lot of AI uses. You can spot it in emails that you get sometimes. You spot it in these various spots, and I guarantee an insincere, like, verbose response is probably AI,
right,
or template.
Yeah.
And so we don't use either at this point. And for, in the foreseeable future, especially for negative reviews, I don't ever see that happening, just because you have to be, I think, in the moment, sincere, acknowledging the issue and looking to create recovery.
Well, and what I would say to that is, if not in hospitality, then where, right? I mean, as far as we are looking for a human to human, this is as we've learned, this is the oldest industry out there, hosting people, human. What have we heard over the years of, oh, well, at one point we're just going to have a virtual check-in, and that's never come to pass. And how many times are we seeing that sometimes a experience is made or break at the front desk because of another person behind the desk?
Yeah.
And I think that is a great illustration of why this human-to-human communication can it be done? Sure, but it's not going to be as impactful. And as you mentioned, as more inauthentic communication begins to rise,
yes,
and we're seeing that in our emails every single day, right? The authenticity is going to start to bloom out of these organizations and companies and businesses that really embrace that. So, well said on your end. This guest experience snapshot it's so cool to see AI come to Travel Media Group, and this be the first way that it is, because it goes back to where Travel Media Group started, which was to help hoteliers,
yes,
right? Help hoteliers improve the guest experience. And that's exactly what this cool, innovative tool is doing. So congratulations to you and your team, Jason, on this. Any final thoughts before we wrap up?
Yeah, I will say just one last thing, as I always do.
That's why we have the question in here.
I know it's not shocking. But, I think all of this is really what Travel Media Group does, or what we try to do, what I aim for on a regular basis with our review response team, our social media team, our development team, is that what we're able to do is we're able to focus here. We're able to focus on reputation. We're able to focus on the information. We're able to focus on responses. We're able to do that because we're not operating, because we're not doing these other things. And so we're able to really care about this, and we do.
Yeah.
And I think that, really is what all of these tools are about. It's about giving you the information in a way that's palatable, giving you the information in a way that's accessible, but also helping in a way that you might not even be able to help yourself, just because of the level of care and focus that we have on it. And I passionately believe in this part of the guest experience, that this is their final experience with your hotel. And we are just so committed. I know this is a sales pitch, Ryan, but I'm going to say it anyway. But we are so committed to making sure that experience is meaningful and impactful.
Yeah, well, it's certainly felt, and the way that you talk about it, and the solutions and innovations that you and your team are developing over in development. So congratulations again. For any hotelier listening to this, for your hotel portfolio of hotels, this is something that if you reach out to us, we can give you a guest experience snapshot. We've got a live demo that we are putting on together. Would love to get you this information. If anything, like I said, make it a challenge. I think these are the 5 things that issues with my property right now. Here are the 5 things that people love. see how many of them match up. And it's just cool information to see, and how AI is continuing to kind of change our hospitality world. So thank you, Jason, and thanks for joining me on the Sweet Spot for 150.
Thanks, Ryan.
Yeah, thanks, and we'll talk to you next time on the Sweet Spot.